Ultimate talk.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. So I want to talk about education versus experience, a key kind of argument in the industry, and kind of putting forward a perspective of why we can't have both. So I don't want to give too much hate to degrees. I am a bit biased because I did a degree apprenticeship a few years back, but I'm going to explain why I think it's the more superior option. So who am I? So picture, so as it happens, in a couple of weeks I'm acting as Jesus in a play. I'm only joking. But I'm currently a security analyst at Featurespace. A couple of the guys here have already given talks from the same company. It's based out of the Science Park here in Cambridge. We do fraud detection for banks. I was an IT apprentice for 5 years at an industrial printing company. And I completed a degree apprenticeship through one of the local unis here, Anglia Ruskin. It lasted 4 years. I was a guinea pig in many ways. So since then, a lot of changes have been made for the apprenticeships, which I think are good. Have improved them greatly. I'm going to kind of direct this more at employers, but I am going to talk to the apprentices or potential apprentices a bit later in the presentation too. So how do they work? So firstly, when I was at school, you were encouraged to do the typical life path. You go to school till you're 16, get good GCSEs, then you attend college for a couple of years. You study 3 to 4, possibly 5 if you're a nerd, subjects. You get good A levels, and then you go to a good uni and you study one subject, and then after that you get a career in that subject. Doesn't always work that way. There are a lot of disadvantages to it. And when I was at school, apprenticeships were seen more as taboo. They were more for like the naughty kids or the special kids who weren't academically inclined, weren't good at school. And traditionally as well, it was seen as a role for college leavers. So people who were leaving college like 18. But I've seen people from 16 to late 50s. So kind of a variety of ages who have engaged as apprentices. So this is, as I say, a presentation to showcase why I think it's a superior option. So they usually require 3 A-levels to enter. However, I didn't have the equivalent A-levels. I entered when I was 17, so I didn't do the traditional one. I only studied IT in college for a year. So I had, I think the equivalent of 1 or 2, but I got an interview with the uni through my organisation, and I managed to win them over. And that's how I got into the guinea pig program. It's a long-term investment, so it's going to be 3 to 6 years, usually. Depending on the track you do and the industry. Obviously, I'm talking primarily from IT and cyber now. It's also going to involve, as you progress through the degree, you're going to spend evenings and weekends, studying and investing time. And you can do bachelor's and you can do master's. One of the guys I did a degree apprenticeship with, it's bachelor's, in his late 50s, he completed a master's shortly after. Very interesting guy, wanted to keep challenging himself. So, apprentices pay 0 university fees. I think the average at the moment is 45,000 for a degree. So a lot of money, and they've just extended the period on which you have to pay. I think it's 30 years now. But this doesn't mean that employers just have to fork out all the costs. So there are 2 options. The first is levy paying. So the organisation pays a levy to the government. Small amount. I don't know. I can't quote you because my organisation never told me that. But you get other benefits from paying those levies, but also if you do that, the government will pay for the whole degree and all the fees. And then the second option is, because the government wants to get people more into apprenticeships and more in industry, they will pay for 2/3 of it, capped, I think it's 18,000. And then the organisation has to pay for the last third. And then for sign up, I just put a link here, to apply, to be an apprentice, apply for apprenticeship. So I'm going to go through some pros for the employers and in the employees, kind of why, motivations. So first one for the employer, you can help fill the skills gap. There is a skills gap there. I was talking to James Moore, who gave a talk earlier, and he had a different kind of mindset on the skill gap, and he said that it was because of where people were placed. He said there was, I think 70% he quoted, people placed as security vendors rather than the small businesses that need them in-house. So, yeah, you could argue that. I think there still is a skills gap. We've got a lot of numbers to prove that. And then for the employee, it's great for those that are not academically inclined, as I said. So it's not just going to be study, and a lot of the modules are going to be relevant to what you're doing in the workplace. So the next one, cheap labour. We're not running a sweatshop, of course, but, you're going to get people at a discounted rate, but they're, youthful and, so I'll go into more, advantages in a minute. And also the employee, they'll be a well-rounded professional at the end. So they're not just an academic that's coming from uni. They know how to conduct themselves in meetings. They know how to write emails. They know these kind of basic things that, you want when you go for your roles. So, and this is another thing, about getting them in young. You can inject current learning techniques, and new knowledge into the workspace. So as a degree apprentice, you are forced to learn. You have to learn, you have to learn the latest learning techniques, and how to study things like mind maps, reports, things that your current, employees might not use. And then of course a big one for employees, possible apprentices, there's no student debt. For the employer, you can enhance your reputation. It's great for the press. Say, yep, we're helping bridge the skills gap. We're giving jobs to these young people who are struggling to get into the industry. And then for the employee, the apprentice, there's no lost time. So you've got 4, 5, maybe 6 years of experience at the end of it, but you've got degrees. Well, maybe degrees if you go for the masters, like my peer did. And then for the employer, you're motivating employees because you're teaching them skills. With a lot of employees now, particularly in cyber, I think Keith was talking about it earlier in his talk with the mid-level, they're struggling to now move to the CISO and the next level because people aren't teaching them the new skills. They're not getting investment. With degree apprenticeships, you're getting that. Whether it's bachelor's, kind of getting in, or master's for excelling a bit. And then for the employee, the apprentice, you're spending time learning on more relevant knowledge. You're not, just engaging in theoretical modules. So I'm going to give you some stats. So this first one here. So if you remember a minute ago when I said about the 2 different payments, so round it up to 70, 7 out of 10 employers pay the government a levy. So the government pays for all of their degree for their apprentices, so probably the way to go, I'd say. And then this one surprised me. So for the age of apprentices, about half of them are 25 plus. So again, going back to that kind of traditional life path of going to university, and then going to university, get a job, doesn't seem like it's really applicable in the real world. The idea that you should have your career and everything set up for your late 20s, early 30s, it's not proving to be popular with apprentices. And then, I don't know how well you can see this actually. Essentially, the yellow graphs are typical apprentices, so that's level 2, level 3, degrees are level 5 to 6, I think, or 6 to 7, 5 to 7. They're going down, and then, I don't know if you can tell, but the green bar are degree apprenticeships. Now, they were first introduced around 2014, the academic year going into 2015. You can say they're slowly going up. And then again, following the colours from the pie chart, the highest people attending degree apprenticeships and overall apprenticeships are 25 plus. I'll let you take that picture. Right. So I think a lot of employees feel like this guy with the skills gap. The industry, shall we say. So the demand keeps increasing. I think we all know that. The cyber criminals, they're not slowing down. If anything, they're speeding up. Employers, sometimes they have unrealistic expectations with their budget as well. So what I see commonly is people want someone who's senior, but they forget that those people are expensive, and they bring with them bad habits. With apprentices, you can bring them in and you can mould them into what you can be. Especially if they're youthful and they come in and, come in straight from school. It's a bit controversial, but, why do you think Hitler created Hitler Youth? It's because he could indoctrinate the youth early on and then mould them as they grew up and turned into adults. If you do that with apprentices, teenagers, and they go into their early 20s, they're coming in with those early learning skills and those patterns of doing things, and they're going to be quite skillful. And then employees aren't keeping skills updated. So people can become slow, they can be stagnant. They might be happy where they are, staying where they are, but if the company wants to progress, apprentices have to learn. They that's part of getting through the degree. They aren't given a choice. So it's just going to be a standard part of their everyday life. So here's a list of famous employers voted by apprentices, the top 100. you probably recognise a few of them from their logos. I've included a few tech companies, of course, like BT Group, who my team lead. She was an apprentice there. Fujitsu, Vodafone, O2, there's a few others. And then Energy and Takeaways. Right, so now I want to talk to the apprentices. So I want to look at the cons. So the first thing is juggling work and studies can prove challenging. Particularly if, you're an apprentice like some of them were who had kids. When you need to start, spending evenings and weekends, it can prove hard and strenuous on the family life. But I think the idea you've got to keep in your head is you're doing this so you can progress in your career and provide them a better life. So in the short term, it kind of sucks, but in the long term, I think it pays off. I also think this can be a good thing because it teaches people about time management and energy management. And there's an ongoing problem in cyber at the moment with burnout. And I think that's because people there's been a lot of demand on them and they haven't managed their time and expectations. And saying no to things too well. So you can't party like most of your uni friends. I've tried that. The thing is, when you come in the next day and you're hungover and you've went to the club, and, maybe you met someone or whatever, but you're not going to be able to perform to the same level as someone who's had clean 8 hours of sleep. They've had their breakfast, and maybe they've put in some study the night before. You're just not going to be able to perform to that level. And yeah, it's not practical, especially if you work full time. You're not going to get away with this long term, and it's going to show. And again, another thing that could be seen as something good early on, but you get responsibility thrust on you. I think it's good to be young at times and to slowly have that on and not force too much pressure, because that can, I think, break people, especially if they're not strong and it's not been a gradual push, but a more of a force. And then teething issues for newer programs. So for mine, for instance, I did mine. I started it in 2017, finished it in 2021, and I won't go into the details because I don't want to throw shade on the learning provider. But there were issues with communication and documentation, and I think that improved over time because I was called back last year. I was thinking something happened. There's been some sort of event, like an investigation, but they called us back, a few of us, to jump on a call with people who were apprentices and people who currently are, to throw in problems and discuss them and give feedback. So I think things are improving. So now I want to talk about the pros, give some positives. And by the way, going back to that slide, I think all these things can be turned around into good things, but they just need to be placed in the right way. Things like the too much responsibility early on, not pounding on straight away, but gradually as they go along. So first one, so assignments at uni can be theoretical, whereas when you do a degree apprenticeship, they have to be work relevant generally. You have to know that they work in the real world, because a lot of the stuff you're going to talk about, NBA providing, is going to be from your workplace. So an example for me would be I did a cloud module, and we did it in Azure, and it was good. I learned a lot about cloud and I learned about Azure, but in my company we were using AWS. And in various companies I use now, most people are using AWS. So it would have probably been better to use that tool. And you learn about how business works as well. Again, going back to conducting yourself in meetings, emails, things like that. And business comes down to people. And I've heard so many stories about people who are uni full-time students, and they'll be in a group project, and one person does all the project work. One person never turns up to the classes. With us, we did group projects. We didn't have that choice. And because we were so used to working full time, we didn't want another person to do all the work. We wanted to be there to learn. And then no debt, as we've talked about. I regularly brag with some of the other guys on my level now who went to uni. It's like, yeah, unlucky. And then opportunities. So you'll soon get over fears of public speaking, presenting, things like that, because you're forced to as an apprentice. Particularly with your internal teams, it's how you're going to get ideas along. And then another would be it's easier to get involved in conferences because people are going to approach you. People aren't going to generally approach students, say, you want to come to this conference, you want to present here because you're a student. Why would we want to do that, right? Really, I think we should, because then it's kind of bringing them in and they can learn things, but it's just not the way things are at the moment. And then you might be lucky enough to travel, which I was. I went for a data migration in India. And that was a learning experience in terms of culture and projects not going to plan. Again, real world. and then it propels you forward. So mine was an IT apprenticeship, but I was able to, in the last year, specialize in cyber. And then immediately after I finished the degree that same year, I transitioned into a security team. This is dependent on how you positioned yourself. If, like, my team lead, for instance, she did a cybersecurity dedicated degree, she was able to go around different teams. And so she had more background knowledge in security. So she was able to, I would argue, propel forward further than someone who, like me, who just did the IT, was a bit limited on the cyber stuff. But I'm catching up. So how does an employee need to proceed? So here is a link for an employer having to sign up. So for the learning provider, it can be a university. It doesn't have to be some third-party company. And then this can be done on the Gov site for advertising here. Or you can display it like any other role with LinkedIn, or use your recruitment team, or Indeed, whatever. You're probably going to get a lot of applicants, I imagine, at the moment, the way the space is going. So you might want to put a time limit on that. And then there's just 2 agreements you've got to sign, and that's just to make sure that the employer, the employee, the apprentice, and the learning provider uphold the standards set in the terms. Are there any questions? He's not going to challenge me. Oh, yeah?
So I'm actually a current apprentice.
Okay.
So one issue I found in my which is for the last two.
You're on your way there, though.
Yes, is that the list of skills you'd obtain from an apprenticeship might be slightly narrower than those you get anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you say that?
So just in terms of like you may be restricted to what your team is working on.
Oh, okay.
Versus, like having that range of knowledge.
That would be limited to the employer. And yeah, I like to think that most employers who are engaging in the apprenticeship scheme are doing it because they're ready to provide opportunities, things like travel, working with different teams. Would you say that would have been, I mean, without you getting in trouble, would you say sometimes maybe you've been narrowed in things you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you think going into uni, doing the different modules, that you get exposure to various things that you might be interested in, but you can't do it your current employer?
I don't know.
Sorry, college, right. Okay, not yet. Right, fair enough. We can talk after if you want. Yeah. Liam, my man?
I'll account for you. So, first of all, I brought on a degree apprentice with its cybersecurity. I really value the system. The completeness within your presentation, what are the risks from the employer point of view?
Okay, yeah, I did have a point in this. I must have missed it. So, my company, what they did was, if you leave if you leave any time before the first trimester, so the first 3 months, September to December traditionally, that's fine. You can get away scot-free. If you leave any time after that, you have to pay for it. So,
I'd like to see a company call that back personally. And the second...
Well, it would be the government's job to do that at that point, traditionally.
That's legal.
Yeah, I don't know enough about that to...
The second point is a skill gap. So, you know it's a skill gap. My position on skill gap might be different to people in the room, so it might not fit everyone in the industry.
Okay.
But particularly within the NHS and our security, the issue with the entry level is senior analysts, team leaders, and new management.
You think there's a ceiling?
No, not a ceiling, there's a gap, there's a hole in it. So what we find is, with an apprenticeship, you need to be able to mentor that apprenticeship to be that standard, to give them the benefit and the organisation benefit.
Right.
What happens when you have that skill gap?
So, you mean the mid-level one?
Yes, sir.
So, what I would maybe encourage then, and this might be hard depending on their age as well, like my peer, he was in his late 50s, he owned the business, he did the bachelor's, but then he went and did the master's. So, even if they've come in and they're mid-level, they've got a degree, I would encourage, become a degree apprenticeship, do a master's. Possibly.
If they have got the skills in-house, I'm not trying to...
No, I want this, we need this.
The completion of the apprenticeship.
Yeah.
If you have apprentices that really good for employers that have got the knowledge and the skills to be able to mentor the...
Oh, I see what you mean. So you're limited on the people who can train in-house.
Your experience, for example, with dictated partially by the people that are setting the task, who are writing reports, that we're doing that 20% of work time effort.
Yeah.
If they haven't got the right people in that, you're putting yourself at risk as well. And that's what I want to highlight, is that from an apprentice point of view, if the organisation is set up